Close your eyes for a second and take a trip back with me to 1992. It was the golden age of VHS tapes, and I bet back then there was hardly a cassette player that had not blasted the soaring high notes of I Will Always Love You. The Bodyguard was not just a blockbuster movie in theaters that year, it was a true pop culture phenomenon. The film left an indelible mark on us about the cold, rugged nature of Frank Farmer, played by Kevin Costner, and the glamorous but lonely aura of Rachel Marron, a role that seemed born exclusively for the late legendary artist Whitney Houston. However, strangely enough, even though we have watched this classic over and over with our families countless times, the shadows behind the spotlight still hid pieces that even the most observant fans never noticed. From the surprisingly bitter truth about the iconic movie poster, heart-stopping accidents on set, to an original script that almost entirely changed the course of cinematic history. Today, sit back with me, find a little warmth from the 90s, and discover 15 shocking truths about The Bodyguard that you might have completely missed. 1. The scam of the century, the girl on the poster is not Whitney Houston. There are secrets in Hollywood history hidden right before our eyes for decades, and this is definitely one of them. Remember the legendary poster of The Bodyguard, the image of Frank Farmer carrying Rachel Marron in his arms amidst the glaring flashlights has become a symbol of 90s cinema. Millions of audiences saw it on VHS covers, at movie theaters, and in countless promotional campaigns around the world. But there is a detail that almost no one noticed. The woman being carried by Kevin Costner in that famous photo is actually not Whitney Houston. According to revelations from the film crew, at the time of the promotional photo shoot, Whitney had left the set. Because they needed to finish the work urgently, the crew used Corinna Johnson, Whitney's stunt double, as a replacement. Her face was obscured by her hair and a perfect camera angle so that no one suspected anything. For over 30 years, audiences worldwide still believed that they were seeing Whitney Houston on that poster. And perhaps that is one of the most successful visual illusions in Hollywood history. Chilling. Chilling, the sharp samurai sword, used absolutely no special effects. If you have ever watched The Bodyguard, you will surely remember the scene where Frank Farmer calmly uses a samurai sword to slice a silk scarf falling in midair. It is a brief moment, but enough to show the calmness, precision, and incredible skill of the character. What makes this movie scene more memorable is a little-known fact. The sword appearing in the shot was not a plastic prop or a cinematic effect. It was a real Japanese sword with a blade sharpened to standard. When the silk scarf, as light as air, was perfectly cut in half, what the audience saw on the screen was almost a real result, not a post-production visual effect. Precisely because of the danger level of this prop, the film crew had to prepare extremely carefully. Just a small deviation in distance or timing of the movement, the consequences could be very serious. Today, when Hollywood often relies heavily on visual effects technology, that scene becomes even more special. It is a reminder of an era when many of the most impressive moments were created with real skills, absolute focus, and a bit of courage behind the camera. 3. A shocking secret, Princess Diana almost starred in Part 2. If there was a sequel to The Bodyguard capable of shocking the whole world, it would be the project that once had the participation of Princess Diana. Many years after the film became a global phenomenon, Kevin Costner revealed a secret that very few people knew. He and the production crew secretly discussed with Diana about her taking on the female lead role in The Bodyguard 2. According to the plan, the story would revolve around one of the most famous people on the planet, trying to find peace amidst media pressure and the relentless pursuit of the public. The amazing thing is that Diana was said to be very interested in this idea. The script was being finalized, and everything seemed to be progressing in a positive direction. But then history turned in a different direction. Kevin Costner said that the final script draft was sent to him on August 31st, 1997. That was also the day the whole world was shocked by the news that Princess Diana passed away in a car accident in Paris. Just thinking about the fact that it almost happened is enough to make fans wonder how legendary The Bodyguard 2 would have become if Diana actually appeared on the screen. 4. The script was once thrown into the trash bin up to 67 times. Whenever watching The Bodyguard, many people often think this is the type of project that Hollywood would definitely compete to produce. But the truth is completely the opposite. For many years, the film script was continuously rejected by studios. Some executives thought the story was too gloomy. Others did not believe the audience would care about the relationship between a famous star and a bodyguard who always lives in the shadows. The project was just passed from one desk to another. According to retold stories, the draft had to receive dozens of rejections before finding a chance to survive. What made the difference was Kevin Costner. After reading the script, he believed that this story had something special. Not only agreeing to act, Costner also used his influence to protect the project from countless doubts from Hollywood. If he had given up like many others, The Bodyguard might have become a forgotten script in some drawer. Instead, it became one of the most remembered films of the 90s. 5. A crazy recklessness, a one-take recording. Today, audiences are used to the fact that every note can be edited with technology. But in the early 90s, many magical moments were still created in a very simple way, letting the artist stand in front of the microphone and sing with all their heart. During the making of The Bodyguard, there were musical scenes recorded with a live band performing right on the set. That meant everything carried a risk. Just a small mistake from the singer or a musician, and the entire scene might have to be redone. But then Whitney Houston stepped out. When the first lines of the song rang out, the atmosphere on the set was said to have almost frozen. No one wanted to make any noise. Some crew members even stopped moving just to listen. What amazed everyone was not technical perfection, it was emotion. Whitney did not just sing, she told a story. By the time the scene ended, many people understood that they had just witnessed something very special. Hollywood does not always create miracles, but that day, it seemed a miracle had truly appeared. 6. Cursed by critics, but a massive box office victory. Perhaps no movie proves the gap between critics and audiences more clearly than The Bodyguard. When the film was released in 1992, many critics were not gentle at all. Some people thought the story was too sentimental. Others commented that Whitney Houston lacked acting experience. The film continuously appeared in negative reviews, and Whitney was even nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award. If you only read the newspapers at that time, you might think this was a failure. But then an interesting thing happened. The audience completely did not care. They flocked to the theaters. They watched it over and over again. They bought the soundtrack. They told their friends and relatives about the love story between Rachel Marron and Frank Farmer. As a result, The Bodyguard grossed over $400 million globally, becoming one of the biggest successes of the year. 3 decades later, very few people still remember the negative reviews, but millions of people still remember every melody, every line, and every emotional moment of the film. Sometimes, the audience is the one to deliver the final verdict. 7. The most fierce battle for a role in Hollywood history. It is hard to believe, but before Whitney Houston was chosen, the role of Rachel Marron was a target that many famous stars desired to have. The list of names mentioned is like a party of music. Legends of that time, Janet Jackson, Joan Jett, Debbie Harry, and Olivia Newton-John were all considered in various forms. Each person possessed a huge fan base and distinct appeal. Hollywood understood that the character Rachel Marron was not just a role. This was an opportunity to become the central face of an ambitious project, where music and cinema merge into one. But then, Whitney Houston appeared. What amazed many people was not only her singing voice, it was also the aura of a true superstar. When Whitney walked into the room, she almost did not need to prove that she was Rachel Marron. She was simply Rachel Marron. Looking back over 3 decades later, it is hard to imagine anyone else who could bring the same appeal, grace, and emotion that Whitney left on the screen. 8. Hidden pain, miscarriage, tragedy, right on the film set. When mentioning The Bodyguard, the majority of the audience remember the halo, the immortal songs, and the radiant smile of Whitney Houston on the screen. But behind that appearance is a pain that very few people know about. During the time the film was being made, Whitney had to go through a deeply heartbreaking event. She suffered a miscarriage. It was a profound personal loss that happened right in the middle of her career peak, and the pressure from Hollywood weighing on her shoulders every day. The amazing thing is that the majority of the audience at that time completely did not know what was going on behind the scenes. Whitney almost did not share publicly about that pain. Instead, she chose to silently face the mental shock and return to work. Whenever watching The Bodyguard again today, many people see a confident star shining on the screen. But behind those scenes is a woman trying to overcome her private loss with all her strength and professionalism. Perhaps that is what makes the role of Rachel Marron so authentic and touches the hearts of the audience more than ever. 9. The tearful eulogy of the male lead. 20 years after The Bodyguard was released, the world once again mentioned the movie in a completely different context. On February 11th, 2012, the news of Whitney Houston passing away shocked millions of people. Not only fans, but also people who had worked with her felt like they had just lost a part of their memory. In the widely televised funeral, Kevin Costner was one of the people invited to speak. He stepped up to the podium with his familiar calmness, but the words that followed moved many people deeply. Costner did not talk about box office revenues or the success of the film. Instead, he mentioned Whitney the person, the woman he had accompanied throughout the making of The Bodyguard. When he shared that no one would ever be able to replace her in the role of Rachel Marron, the entire room went silent. Those were no longer the words of a co-star to a colleague. It was the farewell of a friend to a friend. And in that moment, the boundary between cinema and life seemed to completely disappear. 10. The project shelved for 17 years. Few people know that The Bodyguard was actually a Hollywood dream, lasting nearly 2 decades. The first script was written in the mid-70s, when the entertainment world was very different. At that time, producers envisioned the story to be led by Diana Ross and Steve McQueen, two of the biggest stars in America. The idea of a female superstar protected by a cold and mysterious man had existed long before Whitney Houston or Kevin Costner appeared. But then, the project was continuously delayed. Schedules did not match, studios hesitated, changes in the film industry caused the script to be shelved many times. Year after year, The Bodyguard only existed on paper, until the early 90s, when all the pieces were finally connected. What makes this story special is that the film had to wait for the right moment. If produced in 1975, we would have a completely different film. But thanks to waiting for 17 years, the world got the version associated with Whitney Houston that became a legend as it is today. 11. The extreme panic in the riot scene was 100% real. One of the most memorable scenes of The Bodyguard takes place at the nightclub, when Rachel Marron is suddenly surrounded by a crowd of fans and almost completely loses control of the situation. On the screen, it is a highly dramatic scene, but behind the camera, everything was much more real. According to the stories retold by the film crew, the chaotic atmosphere during filming became overly tense. Dozens of people pushing, screaming, and constantly getting close made Whitney Houston feel truly terrified. The feeling of being trapped in the crowd was no longer acting, but became a completely natural reaction. Right at that moment, Kevin Costner quickly picked Whitney up and carried her out of the siege. The special thing is that his reaction was described by many as a protective instinct rather than a pre-calculated move. When the scene ended, the set was said to have gone silent for a few seconds. Everyone had just completed a cinematic scene, but at the same time witnessed a very real moment between two people who were completely living in their story. Perhaps that is the reason why that movie scene still makes the audience feel authentic after more than 30 years. 12. Almost completely lost the super hit I Will Always Love You. Today, it is hard to imagine The Bodyguard without the immortal melody of I Will Always Love You. Just the first few notes ringing out, millions of people around the world immediately remember Whitney Houston. But the amazing thing is that the song almost never appeared in the film. Initially, the crew planned to use the song What Becomes of the Brokenhearted as the theme song. However, the plan suddenly fell apart when this song was used for another cinematic project. The whole film crew was forced to find an alternative in a very short time. It was Kevin Costner who made a very surprising proposal. He introduced Dolly Parton country music recording named I Will Always Love You. At that time, many people did not believe this song was suitable for a big Hollywood movie. But then Whitney Houston raised her voice. The rest became history. The song not only saved the movie, but also became one of the most successful hits of all time. Sometimes, the greatest moments emerge from incidents no one expects. 13. Queen of Pop Madonna was straightforwardly crossed out. Before Whitney Houston became Rachel Marron in the minds of millions of audiences, many big stars of Hollywood and the music industry were considered for this role. One of the most prominent names was Madonna. In the early 90s, Madonna was one of the most powerful artists in the entertainment world. Her appeal was something no one could deny. Therefore, her interest in The Bodyguard was not surprising at all. However, according to many backstage stories passed down over the years, the meeting between Madonna and the director did not go smoothly at all. The two sides were said to have huge disagreements about the character direction and approach to the film. The atmosphere of the working session quickly became tense. Finally, the project decided to go in a different direction. Looking back today, it is interesting to imagine what the movie would be like if Madonna took the role of Rachel Marron, but perhaps history chose the right person. The combination of Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner created a cinematic magic that hardly anyone else could recreate. 14. Almost banned young audiences because it was too violent. The version of The Bodyguard that we know today is a romantic thriller relatively accessible to a mass audience, but few people know that the first edit used to carry a much darker tone. According to many backstage sources, the early versions contained more stressful elements. Violent scenes were executed more heavily, and the relationship between the two main characters was also built with bolder nuances compared to the final release. This quickly made the studio worried. If the film was rated R, the potential audience would decrease significantly. Meanwhile, The Bodyguard was expected to become a blockbuster for the masses. Therefore, a series of edits were made. Some scenes were cut short, some intense moments were softened. The entire rhythm of the film was adjusted to reach a wider audience. Looking back at the final result, that decision probably changed the fate of the film. The Bodyguard not only conquered adults, but also became the cinematic memory of a whole generation of audiences around the world. 15. A $10 million windfall out of nowhere. When The Bodyguard was released, most of the attention was focused on Whitney Houston. But in another place, a woman was also witnessing her life change in a way no one expected. Dolly Parton. Many audiences thought that Whitney was the one who composed I Will Always Love You. In reality, this song was written by Dolly in 1973 as an emotional farewell to her longtime partner. For nearly 2 decades, the song was loved in the country music community. But when Whitney Houston brought it into The Bodyguard, everything exploded beyond imagination. The song topped the charts around the world. Millions of singles were sold. Radio stations played the song almost continuously for months, and because Dolly owned the songwriting rights, the royalties flowed into her account at a dizzying speed. According to many estimates, the income brought to Dolly amounted to tens of millions of dollars. A seemingly small musical decision turned a country song into a global legend and created one of the most famous royalty earnings in American music history. So we have just gone through 15 secret pieces behind the lens of The Bodyguard. Honestly, after piecing these stories together, every time the melody of I Will Always Love You plays, a completely different emotion rises within me. Deeper, more authentic, and somewhat sadder when remembering the legacy that Whitney Houston left behind. That 1992 film is no longer just a cinematic work, it is a piece of memory for our generation. I hope that with these newly revealed hidden corners, the next time you turn on The Bodyguard on a weekend evening, you will view this classic through an entirely new lens. What about you? What is your most memorable experience with this film or with the music of Whitney? Please linger for a moment and share it with me in the comments section below. Thank you for taking the time to revisit these beautiful nostalgic memories with me. Goodbye, and see you again.